Today I'm going to be showing you how to forge a fireplace blowpipe. Hi, I'm Dennis Frechette, and welcome back. In this video, I'm reposting a project that I did several years ago. It was pretty popular when I posted it, but it's one of those videos that's fallen off the radar and nobody sees it anymore. So I decided to repost it to hopefully reach a new audience. It's a pretty simple project. There's a little bit of forging and some forge brazing. I didn't include the forge brazing process in the original video, but I will have a link for a forge brazing video that I did in the description. So that'll give you the complete tutorial if you're not familiar with brazing in the fire. So that's what I have for you today, and I hope you find it interesting. Today I'm going to be working on what I call a fireplace blowpipe. It's basically just a long pipe, and it allows you to direct a stream of air into a fire without having to get your face too close to that fire. The origin of this piece dates back to a time when the fire in a fireplace was never really extinguished at night. They would simply bury some embers in some ashes, and in the morning they would revive that fire by blowing air into it, either with a bellows or with one of these blowpipes. So at the one end of the pipe you have the mouthpiece and the handle, and the other end is tapered down to a fine point, and you have a very small drill hole at the other end. So this produces a really high pressure, high velocity stream of air, and it really perks up a fire. This is another piece of equipment that's been taken out of the home and brought out to the campsite by reenactors because it is so handy, portable, and indestructible. For this project, I won't be making the pipe. I'm just going to be using a length a half-inch standard black pipe. Do not use galvanized for this. The fumes are toxic. This piece happens to be 20 inches long, but of course you can make it any length that you want. And for the mouthpiece and the handle, I'll be making that out of a short length of 1/8 by 2-inch flat bar. And at this end you can see how I started roughing out the material for the handle. This choppy cut here is going to be smoothed out later with a grinder before I actually start forging it. The first thing that I need to work on is to draw down the end of that pipe to a point, and for that I'm going to be using my V-block, which I have set up in my anvil mounted vise. Now, the last time I used this setup, I got a couple of comments, but a bunch of emails of people basically saying, why would anybody do this? Why don't you just modify the end of this tool to fit your hardy hole directly? And the reason is quite simple. I have a lot of tooling and jigs that are made to be set up in vices because that's how I worked years ago, long before I even thought of doing videos or even the technology was available. I had my shop set up as more of a production shop. So I had a series of vices that were set up very low, at anvil height so that I could mount any number of jigs or tools that I needed permanently in a vise and leave the anvil free for forging. And that simple approach to setting up a workshop saved me a lot of time and a lot of bending over switching out anvil tools. So now this anvil mounted vise allows me to use all of the jigs and fixtures that I already have, plus it has the added benefit that I don't have to move the camera because it's already pointed at the anvil. I'm going to be forging the end of this pipe with this light cross peen. It has a fairly broad face, but it still fits into this V-block nicely. When I'm tapering the end of a pipe, the first thing that I do is chamfer the end of that pipe down very sharply right at the end. I don't bother working the length of the pipe at all. I just hammer the end and try to narrow that opening as quickly as possible. By closing off the end first, that really strengthens the whole cross section of that pipe and allows you to forge the rest of it very, very aggressively. Now I'm ready to start hammering in the tapered section. I'm using what's left of the heat to hammer out the cross peen marks before they get out of hand. And with this final heat, I'm just refining that taper a little further. Now I'm ready to start working on the mouthpiece, and you can see how I've ground a graceful taper so it makes a better transition from the handle into the mouthpiece. I don't really need to do a lot of forging on this. I'm basically just reorienting the handle so it angles out from the main plate, and I'll be rounding off the edges and tapering the end of the handle so I can curl it into a decorative loop. Here I'm just using a set of dividers to quickly figure out where the center of this square section is. I've measured the width and I'm marking that as the length, and here I'm just scribing some marks in from each corner to give me a rough idea of where I should put the center punch mark. I'm going to be drilling a hole that's quite a bit smaller than the pipe, and I'm going to be drifting it to fit the pipe. And that process is just naturally going to create a funnel shape. Here I'm just using the center punch mark to scribe a reference circle that I'm going to use to rough out the mouthpiece. And here it is after I've roughed it out with the cutoff wheel. I'm going to be leaving it on the bar through the entire forging process. This is a small, awkward piece to be handling with tongs, so leaving it on the bar is just going to simplify the whole process. So I won't be cutting it off the bar until all the forging is done. I'm resting this pipe on my hardy hole because I don't have a bolster the right size, and this final heat I'm going to be drifting the mouthpiece with the actual pipe to get the exact fit that I want. And that's the reason I started off by forging the end of the pipe, because I knew that I was going to need it for this operation. The last thing that I need to do before I can cut the mouthpiece off of the main bar is to roughly shape the handle. At this point, I'm ready to cut it from the bar, clean up all the edges, and I can drive it back onto the pipe and braze it in place. There isn't a lot of stress on this piece, so if you want to solder it instead of brazing, that would work fine too. The pieces fit together very tightly and there's a lot of contact areas, so solder would hold quite well. Here I did braze it, and I'm using the last bit of the heat to refine the shape of the mouthpiece and straighten it out a little bit. Sometimes in the fire, they do shift out of position, and you do need to modify it slightly to get it to look even. Whether you're using copper or brass, they do solidify at such a high temperature, it really does give you quite a bit of working time to refine the shape. The hammering also helps to break off all that thick scale that happens when you're brazing. It also helps to smooth out any drips or runs that are sitting on the surface. Placing the brazed end of the pipe in a pot of boiling water for 5 or 10 minutes will also remove any remaining flux on the surface. Now, I don't have any glowing embers to demonstrate this on, and it probably wouldn't photograph too well anyway, so I'm going to use this pilot scale to demonstrate the kind of high pressure stream that it develops and the pinpoint accuracy that you have. And again, here's what it looks like all assembled.